All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today for this virtual public meeting for the Pipers Creek Natural Drainage Systems Project. This is a Seattle Public Utilities-led project in collaboration with the Seattle Department of Transportation. Before we get started, just want to go over a few logistics as it comes to the Zoom webinar. First, just want to note that we are recording this webinar so we can post it on our project website for those who aren't able to join us tonight. If you'd like to turn on captions, you can click the live transcript button. For tonight, all participants will be muted, but we encourage you to submit questions using the Q&A box. You can submit questions throughout the presentation and we'll try to answer them at the end. And if someone posts a question that you agree with, you can give it a thumbs up and we'll start by answering the most upvoted questions. And if you're joining us today by phone, you can always visit our project website and send a comment or any questions via the comment form that we have posted there. So first, we just like to start with some round of introductions. My name is Jonathan Brown. I'm the project manager for Seattle Public Utilities, and I'll be your primary point of contact for SPU on this project. Joining me today are my colleagues from SPU, Thomas Hawk and Benjamin Barrett. They are your North Seattle Drainage and Wastewater Capital Program representatives. We're also joined today by a couple representatives from the Seattle Department of Transportation, Brian Doherty and Chris Kartheiser. They'll be talking about their sidewalk program. And then we have some of our design consultants with us as well. Justin Martin, Nathan Polanski, Catherine Deers, and Robin Randalls. For our agenda today, we wanted to go over what the problem is that we're trying to solve with our project, go over the project background and our goals, review what a natural drainage system is. We'll give you an update on the Pipers Natural Drainage Systems project. And then SDOT will have an opportunity to speak a little bit more about their funding for pedestrian improvements in the study area. Then we'll talk through our next steps and then try to answer as many questions as we can. So first off, we'll start with some background information on our project goals. And if you've been able to attend some of the past project presentations from 2021 or 2022, some of this may sound familiar to you. But just starting at a high level about what the problem is, we live in a very watery city. We're famous for our rain, but also for our beautiful creeks, lakes, and the Puget Sound. So when water falls on the roofs, streets, and parking lots in your neighborhood, eventually it makes its way into Pipers Creek, which flows into Puget Sound. So more than 370 billion gallons of polluted water from urban areas are carried into our water bodies by stormwater runoff each year. So SPU and the Seattle Department of Transportation are partnering together to help protect Pipers Creek, the Puget Sound, and all the living things that rely on the ecosystem. And how do we go about addressing this pollution problem? I think first it's important to note that the city has signed an agreement with the federal government, a consent decree, to clean up our stormwater. And that program is called the Plan to Protect Seattle's Waterways. As part of the city's regulatory compliance efforts for meeting the consent decree, we've developed an integrated plan. And this integrated plan is a comprehensive program and schedule for implementing projects and other measures to improve water quality in our waterways. And one of the main programs in this plan is to build natural drainage systems in Seattle's creek basins. So this project, the Pipers Creek Natural Drainage System project, is one of those stormwater projects in the integrated plan. And you may already know that we have similar projects under this plan in Pipers Creek, west of Greenwood. We'll look at a picture of that later. And we also have projects in the Thornton Creek and Longfellow Creek basins. So looking closer at our project goals, you can see in the image, the orange box shows our study area, and it covers approximately 40 blocks between Greenwood and Evanston from the west and east, and then 130th to 150th, 130th down to 115th. As we have done our due diligence of reviewing the Piper's watershed boundary and feasible space to retrofit in the right-of-way, the study area has been refined further to be between Finney and Dayton and the northern boundary of Piper's, which is about halfway between 127th and 130th, all the way down to 115th. This process to reduce the area was done by focusing on our project goals, which are one, to reduce pollution in our waterways by improving the water quality from the neighborhood streets that drain to Piper's Creek. We're also looking to manage stormwater flows and improve localized flooding issues that are in the right-of-way where we can within our project footprint. We're also looking to improve landscape diversity in the neighborhood and adding street trees. And we also want to provide pedestrian safety, community mobility, and traffic calming where possible. So to accomplish these goals, we will build natural drainage systems and pedestrian improvements on some of the blocks in this area. We'll need to capture street runoff from the project area and direct it to NDS cells that may be on a different block. So in addition to building the NDS cells themselves, we're looking at other drainage improvements above and below ground, including pipes and street edging to help direct and capture street surface runoff. The aim of the NDS program is to provide as many of these benefits as possible to the community. And one of the ways we do this is by partnering with our city, with other city projects for efficiency and other city partners like Department of Transportation. Coming up, Ryan Doherty will be able to give a bit more detail on SDOT's, what they're looking at in this neighborhood. Next, as part of the background, I just want to explain a little bit more about what these natural drainage systems are. So at the simplest level, we're really just trying to mimic the natural environment within our built environments. We really want, like this image shows, these developments are roadways to act more like a forest or a more natural conditions. So the NDS cells themselves are depressions in the ground along the edge of the street with plants and special soils in them where the water can drain into. The water is then retained where the contaminants can be removed before the water continues on its way into the creeks and other waterways. So this next image just shows a bit more detail about how the system itself works. So you can see that the dirty roadway runoff flows into the landscaped areas and it's slowed down by the plants, grass, and shrubs, and then filters through this thick soil layer, this engineered soil layer, before it makes its way into this pipe, this underdrain system, where the clean water is then discharged into a deep well for infiltration. The cells will have underdrains, like I noted, and they'll also be lined. So we're trying to prohibit shallow infiltration, and the next slide will show the deep infiltration system that we have planned. But essentially, we'll be conveying the clean water from the underdrains to the deep injection well system, as shown in this image right here, that will distribute the water about 50 to 100 feet below the existing ground, so well below any basement footprints. Next, we just wanted to give a preview of what these natural drainage systems look like or can look like. We've been working on these projects. SPU has been working on these projects for more than 2 decades now. So the image on the left there you see is in Ballard, the Ballard Natural Drainage Systems project, and photo was taken in the spring. That central photo there is the Venema NDS project, which is just on the other side of Greenwood, so it's also in the Piper's Creek watershed. And then the last image is the High Point NDS project, which is in West Seattle, and that image is taken in the fall, winter. So just kind of give an idea of how these cells can look across different seasons. And the other thing that's worth noting about these is that these systems really rely on living plants and shrubs to filter the water. So there is a bit of a process that they'll go through before they are fully established. So this graphic is really just trying to represent that. You see on the far left there, that's the landscape planter strip that's been unimproved that we will be looking to install natural drainage system cells in. And then as we move to the right, left to right, you see a newly planted cell, a cell after 1 year of growth, and then finally a cell after 5 years. It's reached full maturity. Finishing up on the background, I just wanted to provide a little bit of a project update. We did have a bit of a restart of the project because we needed to expand the study area. So we initiated our options analysis phase initially in 2021, and we started with around 40 blocks, like I mentioned at the beginning. And we've been going through several stages of evaluating blocks as candidates for these NDS sites. And we performed feasibility analysis in the field to assess where it would be possible to construct these in the right of way. And we also worked with S.Dot arborists to determine which large trees we aim to protect as part of the project. And so some of you may have joined us in the past few years when we've connected with community in this area to let them know about the project, including a live virtual informational and Q&A Zoom similar to this one, as well as an online survey. So back in 2022, we had developed some preliminary concepts that were really focused on Finney and Dayton between 127th and 120th, but we realized that we needed to increase the study area back down to 115th to make sure we met the drainage goals for the project that we've committed to in the integrated plan. So in 2023, we underwent a selection process for a consultant team. So we brought that team on to begin to finish up options analysis and begin the design phase of the project. And so this slide is just showing you exactly where we're at. We are right now in what we call a 10% design phase, and then our next steps will include selecting our final blocks for NDS, developing those designs, and continuing to coordinate further with Department of Transportation for the sidewalk pedestrian improvements, as well as any traffic calming. And next I'm going to hand the presentation over to Nathan Polanski and our consultant team. He's going to talk a little bit more about how we decide where to put these cells.
Thanks, Jonathan. One of the common questions we get as we're deciding where to build are kind of how do we decide where to build natural drainage systems? And there's a lot of evaluation that goes into siting natural drainage systems along a public street. Two of the most important things are the space that's available in the public right-of-way, based on what's there today, as well as the city's long-term plans or build out of the public right-of-way. So kind of what SDOT's plans are for providing sidewalks and kind of building out the street. So the space that's available, as well as kind of where does drainage runoff want to flow. And so typically you want to put the natural drainage systems where stormwater is collecting. And so really looking at the downstream end of the blocks. So those are two of the big kind of technical items, but it's also, we've been looking closely at where the existing utilities are, both above and below grade. Jonathan mentioned kind of taking a look at existing trees and vegetation, the slopes of the streets. The study area within our project study area is generally very shallow slopes. So most of the streets from that standpoint work well for natural drainage systems. But then we also are looking at where people are kind of accessing houses, whether it be kind of the sidewalks, driveways, and then also how people are moving along the street. So all of that goes into kind of siting cells, as well as coordinating kind of with goals from the Department of Transportation and community input. Next slide. So here are some pictures of the study area. And so this really shows the variety of conditions that exist along the streets in your neighborhood. That top left picture, you can kind of see there's a lot of existing ditch and culvert drainage that's alongside the road edge. You also see some of the ponding that's happening. I mentioned the kind of shallower slope or flatter streets that exist, and because of that, there's more ponding that happens alongside of the many of the streets in the study area. The streets, a lot of the parking that occurs, this happens off of the pavement. So rather than some other neighborhoods that have curbs and people park up against the curbs, in our study area, a lot of people park either parallel or perpendicular off of the pavement. And so that's something that, as we're looking at parking patterns and the configuration of the right of way, we take into consideration. The school and church at the south end have different uses of the public right of way in terms of drop off and pickup. So we think about how those are operating around those uses. So all of these and very varied conditions that are happening throughout. And as I'm sure you know, that very few of these blocks have existing sidewalks. Next slide. So this slide shows the two types of natural drainage systems that are being considered. On the left are standard cells with graded side slopes. And on the right side of the image are cells with structural soil cells. So all of the natural drainage cells that are built will be lined. So water that enters the cell is directed into the underdrain and into the downstream UIC well that Jonathan mentioned that discharges water 50 to 100 feet below the existing ground surface, so that water doesn't infiltrate directly into the ground near the drainage systems. The NDS with graded slide slopes are swale-like depressions that parallel the street. So these are the two images on the left. And these cells have really gentle slopes on both sides of the cell, on this roadway side and the sidewalk side, and have a flat bottom area to allow that collected water to pond and soak through the soils into the drain below. The NDS with structural soil cells has that same gentle slope on the street side, but on the sidewalk side, there's a vertical surface. And so the drop off between that kind of sidewalk edge and the bottom of the cell wouldn't be more than 18 inches. So it's kind of fairly shallow. And this system uses a technology that allows us to put natural drainage systems under the sidewalk and in areas where there's not as much space. So when we're constrained by space or kind of limited space with existing utilities, these provide some more options. And the images here on the right are from an NDS project that was constructed in North Ballard. Next slide. So these next few slides show how the existing streets could change with the addition of natural drainage systems and other street improvements. Most of the streets in the study area are residential streets, so they have a 60-foot right-of-way, and what's shown in that top cross section is allows for cars to travel in both directions, but really in a single lane, and then have on-street parking on both sides of the street. Okay. However, as I mentioned, and you saw in that image a couple slides ago, a lot of the on-street parking that happens today really happens off of the pavement rather than on the edge of the pavement, and which you'll see in other neighborhoods. And then people typically walk along the road edge where there are no sidewalks. So that's kind of the existing condition. The middle section shows how the streets would change with the natural drainage system improvements and other street improvements. So this includes widening the roadway. So parking can occur on the pavement rather than off of the roadway on the gravel shoulder. The edge of the pavement would also be modified to help kind of route stormwater runoff down the block to the natural drainage cells, and that will have the impact of reducing the puddling and ponding that occurs along many of the streets. And new sidewalks will also be built on the side of the street with the natural drainage system improvements. The bottom cross section is similar to the middle one, but it shows that natural drainage cell with the structural soil cells and that vertical surface next to the sidewalk. So these are kind of the residential street configuration. So this is Finney Avenue North throughout the study area, Dayton Avenue North, north of 125th, and most of the east-west streets from 115th to 127th. Next slide. So the project team is also expecting that in some places we'll need to use curb extensions for siting natural drainage cells in locations. So that picture on the bottom left shows a small curb extension that kind of sticks out into the roadway. And so along many of the streets in the study area, we're not able to locate the NDS on the same side of the street as the existing water main because there's not enough space to meet the separation requirements between the two systems. And so for these streets, curb extensions can be used to allow runoff from one side of the street to be piped across to the other side of the street. The curb extensions won't extend for the entire block. They'll just be used for short distances along the streets where the actual NDS cells are located, and they'll remove parking on that side of the street for kind of short distances. Next slide. The last condition to show is how the NDS could be configured along Dayton Avenue North, south of 125th. This street is classified as an arterial street. So arterials have 2 lanes of vehicle travel. So rather than the single lane that accommodates vehicles going in both directions, there's a separate north and a southbound lane. Dayton also has a 60-foot right-of-way, but to meet SDOT's street standards, street improvements would be constructed with a curb and gutter along the edge of the road. And so the curb and gutter allows that stormwater to drain down the block to the NDS. However, the big difference with the improvements along the arterial is the curb and gutter will result in a change to parking. And so where people can currently pull off the road to park along the road, where curb and gutter is installed, it'd be removing on-street parking along Dayton Avenue. Next slide. So as shown on the previous slides, the street improvements will include a change to the road edge to redirect stormwater from the street to drain to where the NDS facilities are located. And we're looking at a variety of strategies from an asphalt thickened edge, which is shown in the photo on the left between the driveways. There are also some kind of grading considerations that we're looking at. And so we might be looking at a concrete runnel, but something that's not your typical curb and gutter, with the exception of what's happening along Dayton Avenue. Jonathan mentioned the deep infiltration wells. So one of the other things that will be needed are the under drain pipes to convey stormwater that passes through the NDS to the downstream UIC well. And so construction for this will involve trenching to install the drainage pipes as well as the NDS. We do expect that there'll be some adjustment or replacement to existing utility service pipes in the city's right-of-way. And so this is work that would be coordinated with property owners who are impacted during later stages of design and prior to construction. So Jonathan showed a map of our study area that we started with. And based on the work that's been done to date, this shows kind of where we've really honed in on the feasibility for natural drainage systems. So we're looking at both Finney and Dayton from 115th to the limit of the Pipers Creek Basin. So that dashed boundary is our NDS study area. But we're showing that those lines extend all the way to 130th, given that SDOT is going to be participating in providing sidewalks along selected streets. So Finney and Dayton, and then also some of the east-west streets, 115th, 117th, 120th, and 127th. So with that, we turn it over to SDOT to talk a bit more about the street improvements and sidewalk improvements that are planned and as we move forward.
Thank you, Nathan. As Jonathan mentioned, I'm Brian Doherty. I am with the Project Development Division at SDOT, and I will just be talking about the possible collaboration of SDOT and SPU on this project. As many of you probably already know, there are very extensive missing sidewalks, especially in District 5 in North Seattle, north of 85th Street. And the funding that we've had in the past has allowed us to chip away at that need to build sidewalks at a relatively slow rate. So at the rate that we had been funded at, we would expect to build out the sidewalk network in about 200 years. So not a short-term endeavor, very gradual effort to build sidewalks everywhere that we want to build sidewalks. There's approximately 27% of city streets that are missing sidewalks. And that number is higher on non-arterial streets, and that number is higher in District 5, where this project is located. Next slide. So the city recently adopted the Seattle Transportation Plan, which creates a prioritization framework that we use to prioritize the construction of new sidewalks and the funding of new sidewalks. And in summary, it prioritizes areas that are in close proximity to K public schools, to parks and other destinations where people want to walk, to transit stops, frequent transit routes, And then we also include items from the comprehensive plan, so urban villages and urban centers and pedestrian zones. We also look at safety, the speed of traffic, the volume of traffic, collision records, and then we also overlay an equity network to prioritize street segments for new sidewalk construction. So this map here shows the prioritization of missing sidewalks in the study area, or a little bit bigger than the study area. But basically the takeaway here is that Finney and Dayton both rank relatively high in the Seattle Transportation Plan, which is why when this project came to our attention, we said that we were interested in partnering with SPU to extend the reach and the benefits to the neighborhood so that we could build more sidewalks than otherwise we would have if SPU was just doing this alone. And next slide. So here's some examples of projects that we recently completed in partnership with SPU. Southwest Kenyon Street and 24th Avenue Southwest in West Seattle. These are in the Longfellow Creek Basin, and this was a perfect example. I think there's a comment in the chat about extending sidewalks beyond areas where the NDS is being constructed, and that's exactly what we did here. So we partnered with SPU to make sure that the sidewalks connected into the existing sidewalk network, so we didn't have sidewalks to nowhere. And provided that additional funding to make that possible. Fortunately, 3 weeks ago, we got a new transportation levy, and with the existence of that new levy, we have a large increase in funding for new sidewalks. So this is going to provide us the opportunity to partner with SPU to extend the reach and benefits to the neighborhood and build more blocks of sidewalk as part of this project. And one of the things, since we're early on in this planning phase of this project, we would love to hear from you. Are there destinations within the neighborhood where you'd like to walk? Or parks, schools? Are there streets where you feel particularly where sidewalks are needed because of speed or volume of traffic, or because the streets are narrow? And also to connect, as I mentioned, to connect to existing sidewalks. So for example, the existing sidewalks on 125th and 130th. And then I think I hand it back to Jonathan, right?
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Appreciate that.
Right.
So just quickly, we'll go through our next steps. Sorry. There we go. SPU and SDOT will continue to collaborate on the design and implementation to create a coordinated project. So please, if you haven't already, you can sign up for email updates on our website, where we'll send out periodic updates and promote things like this event tonight or any other outreach that we have coming up. But we'll be evaluating streets that are the most cost-effective for retrofitting with NDS, and that also meets the project drainage goals required as part of the consent decree. In the spring, we will report back the blocks that have been identified for moving forward for 30% design and the portions of the blocks where NDS would be expected. And then we also have on our project website a comment feedback form. I think we'll also be dropping that into the Q&A link as well. So please go there and provide your feedback if you have a chance and there's anything you want to share with us related to the NDS cells or the pedestrian improvements like Brian was mentioning. And then for those who were on the phone tonight, and if you aren't able to ask us questions, you can again go to the website, post comments there, or reach out to me directly as well. And then once this webinar ends tonight, will all automatically be redirected to the project website. And lastly, just wanted to go quickly, high level, go over the project timeline. So as I mentioned, we are right now in our options analysis phase, or our 10% design. We'll be completing that process early next year. And at that time, we'll come back out to the community and provide an update and kind of gather additional feedback.
Hey, Jonathan, sorry to interrupt, it's Catherine. Can you speak a little louder or turn up your mic a bit? We had someone ask if you could be.
Oh gosh, I apologize for that. Yes, thank you. Sorry about that, everybody. So in 2025, early next year, we'll finish up our options analysis process, and we'll transition into our design phase. We'll come back out to the community at that point and provide the update on the selected blocks and gather additional feedback to inform our design. And we'll continue to coordinate with SDOT on the design of the sidewalk and walkway improvements. In 2026, we'll continue to work on our design and permitting and do some community engagement more around the construction phase. And we right now anticipate going into construction at the end of 2027 and into 2028. And then after that, SPU will be maintaining the natural drainage system cells. And at this point, we can go through any questions.
Yeah, we have 4. Do you want me to read them out loud, Jonathan? That you can.
Sure.
All right. So the first one is, how many feet from the edge of the existing road will the NDS reach toward into the existing home's front yard?
Yeah, so I can take that, Jonathan. Yeah, so the existing pavement that's out there today, the road is a little bit narrower than the city standard. And so along all of the streets, the street would be widened a couple of feet on either side before locating the NDS. So the NDS will probably be about, 8 to 20 feet at either edge from the property line. So none of the work is planned to be outside of the right of way, although there may be some places where we're doing improvements to either reconnect a driveway or walkways to people's houses that could extend onto property, and those would be coordinated with property owners during the design.
Great, thank you. A number of monitor wells have been drilled in the project area in the last 8 or so years. Are these going to be part of the project?
So those wells were all installed to get a better understanding of the subsurface soils and the infiltration capacity. And so those were done to inform the design. One of the challenging things is that you don't know where the design improvements are going to be. And so the actual UIC wells that will be used to infiltrate the stormwater will be additional wells and different than the wells that have been out there for the monitoring wells that were installed to inform the design.
Great, thanks. Will new sidewalks extend beyond the new swale areas? I'm not sure.
Yeah, so the sidewalk improvements, the great thing with the transportation levy passing a few weeks ago, like Brian mentioned, is sidewalks will extend beyond the NDS areas. So SPU is required to provide sidewalk alongside the natural drainage system improvements as sort of a development requirement. But now that SDOT is participating and kind of partnering with SPU within the study area, those sidewalks will definitely be able to be extended for the full length of the block.
Perfect, thanks. Most of the blocks in the project area have no sidewalks. Where there's no sidewalks, there are frequent scattered open holes of drainage pipes in the ground at the ends of open ditches. These are unmarked and a big hazard for pedestrians. What is SPU planning to do about areas not part of the new NDS with new sidewalks? This is an SDOT Vision Zero issue also, thanks.
Yeah, so on blocks that don't receive NDS, I think the project team will be working with SDOT to kind of identify sidewalk improvements. And I would say, the kind of things that are out there that are hazard, we'd be looking at closely to address those hazards and kind of figuring out kind of what's needed to kind of improve safety. Yes. Brian, is there anything else that you'd want to add to that?
I think you said it well there, that not only will we be looking to partner so that we end up with full blocks of sidewalk, but we also will be willing to consider extending on blocks where SPU might not be working, if that means connecting to things that people want to go to or addressing safety issues. So, for example, we might look at connecting new sidewalks over to the new sidewalks that were recently built on Greenwood, for example, or connecting down to the church and school. And so definitely open to hearing about specific locations that are a concern.
Great. One more so far. Will sidewalks be added in the entire area of Finney and Dayton between 127th and 115th?
So we don't anticipate sidewalks everywhere. And they will definitely not be on both sides of the street. So along the blocks that have NDS, there'll be sidewalk on the same side as the street as the NDS. On the blocks that don't receive NDS, as Brian mentioned, we'll be looking to kind of really kind of go through those kind of SDOT priorities, making connections to parks, to schools, transit stops, and sort of completing that priority network.
Great. Thank you. We have another one. Will there be an overall plan to eliminate the open culverts and make the adjacent streets safer for walking and bikes?
So there is not an overall plan to eliminate culverts. On the blocks where NDS is proposed, we talked about kind of the need to kind of make sure water is draining down to the NDS facilities and typically at the end of the block. And so in those locations, there'll be a street edge treatment that's provided to help convey that runoff. And where those are provided, we would anticipate that some of those kind of ditch and culvert systems will need to be modified or eliminated to make sure that we're providing kind of positive drainage and water isn't ponding. In terms of making streets safer for walking and biking, one of the things we have heard from SDOT is the desire to provide traffic calming and help slow cars driving down along the streets. And so that's something that we're going to be looking at. And so hopefully that combination of having new sidewalks, integrating the traffic calming strategies will all sort of contribute to a kind of safer walking and biking environment.
Okay, this is more of just a comment, I think. Broadview Thompson Elementary School on Greenwood North and North 130th is supposed to be a safe routes to school and needs sidewalks. Thank you for that comment. And Dayton and Finney from North 125th both need sidewalks for safe routes to school. Thank you, Barbara, for noting those.
Yeah, and those are part of the home zone that SDOT's worked with the community in the past. And so those are some of the streets I'm sure Brian and the SDOT team are going to be looking closely at. And those northern blocks are also part of SPU's kind of localized flooding program. And so we are looking at natural drainage system improvements on the north end blocks.
And I'll just mention, since Barbara mentioned Greenwood, the new levy will allow us to finish all the sidewalks on Greenwood. Finally, after many years of chipping away at it, we're going to have the funding to finish that up and finish all the sidewalks on Greenwood. So I'm super excited about that.
Great, we have another one that came in. Since Dayton now has stop signs and the ability to turn south on Dayton from 125th if you're headed westbound is no longer possible, it seems like Dayton isn't a full secondary arterial anymore. Is there a possibility of making Dayton no longer a secondary arterial and freeing you up to make more changes to benefit the health of the sound?
Yeah, I think this is probably something SDOT could speak better to, but I think the kind of potential dearterialization of Dayton is something that is being looked at. And that now obviously has, as we talked about the different cross sections for integrating NDS, that a change to that street type would definitely change the ability to integrate NDS.
Thank you. That's all our questions. Oh, Other one. Can we get another traffic light on North 125th as it has become a higher speed arterial between 99 and Greenwood? And also, pedestrians are crossing at any given time of day.
That is definitely something that we will consider. We're also going to look at crossings of 130th on the northern end.
Just to clarify, Brian mentioned the sidewalks on Greenwood, but just to clarify, that's not going to be part of this project. That would be a separate SDOT project.
Okay, some deep ditches along the north side of 125th are not well maintained, and a contact with the city is often required to get vegetation cleared periodically. When the vegetation is tall, the ditches are not visible and are a safety hazard. Can this situation be improved?
Yeah, so 125th is not, as you kind of remember from that map, is not one of the streets that we're looking at for NDS. And there's a couple of reasons. One, as an arterial, there's not as much space that's available. There are also some larger public utilities underground. There's a duct bank and a larger water main. And so I think taking a look at that as part of the NDS project is something we won't be looking at, but I think it is something that we'll want to talk. Project team can work with SPU and SDOT to kind of take a look at those existing conditions and see how that could potentially be improved.
We don't have any more right now, but let's maybe wait a second. Any more come in?
Yeah, thank you all for kind of asking great questions.
A question about the unmarked intersection on 123rd and Evanston.
Familiar with that. Brian, is that something you're familiar with, or?
Not familiar with it. So is a clarifying question, is that a request for a marked crosswalk at 123rd and Evanston?
Just says, how about the unmarked intersection? So I guess maybe this person can give some more context.
That'd be great.
Just says there's no stop or yield signs. And then Barbara is seconding the need for another traffic light that's uncontrolled between Greenwood and Aurora. Heavy, fast traffic on North 125th.
Got it. So I'm not familiar with 123rd and Evanston, but we can take a look at it. And as I mentioned, definitely going to be taking a look at crossing opportunities at 125th and 130th.
We have a question about if we're coordinating with the Home Zone community group who worked with Seattle neighborhood greenways on traffic calming.
Yeah, so I think as the project moves forward in design, Brian mentioned the transportation levy that was just passed. I think they're sort of getting up to speed now that there's funding. And so I think there'll be kind of several conversations happening between SP and SDOT and sort of how to kind of move forward and make sure that those previous conversations are kind of being picked up and evaluated for kind of current needs.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, last call. Any more questions? Just a comment that the Greenways group cannot make real infrastructure and doesn't necessarily know the neighborhood. Thanks, Barbara. We'll make note of that. I've not seen any more.
All right. Well, thank you everybody so much for joining us tonight. Again, if you have any other comments or questions, please feel free to visit the website and post them there, or you can reach out to me directly as well. And we look forward to reconnecting with you all next spring.